Hey, you guys. So I am going to do an interview right now with one of my friends. She's a younger generation than me. And we are going to talk about the subject of racism. And so I'm mostly going to let her talk. She chose to be anonymous. So you get me on camera instead. She's much prettier. Trust me. Sorry. So we're going to just have a quick conversation about the things that she has experienced and go from there. So I will just let you get started.
All right. Well, first off, again, thanks for having me and letting me kind of share my story. I guess one thing kind of starting off, this is probably some important context, is just the fact that I am Gen Z. And so I do think it's really interesting in the fact, Gen Z is what, the second to last, newest generation now. And the amount of stuff that I've still managed to experience. And as I've gotten older and just looking back at the lack of representation in things, or seeing the newer things like toys even that are coming out on the market. And wow, I wonder how different I would have maybe seen myself or my peers if I had something. So I guess starting off, probably also another important note is the fact that I am biracial. So one of the big things that I also never really took into account or thought about much until I got older was just how being raised in white households would be. I wasn't prepared for navigating the world as a Black woman and how I was perceived. I was always told, you're biracial, you have both. But at the end of the day, that's great that I know my identity, but that's not how the rest of the world is going to see me. That's not how I'm going to be perceived. And so I was never really fully equipped to deal with how that was going to be for me. And so I think I remember some of my first, racial encounters was probably young elementary school, because of the fact that I didn't really learn about it at home or know what to expect. It was definitely very blindsiding for me. I want to say maybe the earliest that I can remember was maybe around second or third grade. I think that's probably when I also learned about the N-word outside of music and media. And typically from kids that were my age. I don't think I've ever been called that by an adult. Definitely kids my age. I'm just getting made fun of for my hairstyles because this was another factor, was living in a white household with parents that also weren't necessarily fully equipped to learn how to take care of me properly. My hair was a lot to manage, and because it wasn't managed properly, it just kind of added on stuff for bullies or people that were just a little bit more ignorant to have ammo on me. So I got teased a lot for my hair, teased a lot for my skin color.
And you're beautiful, and so many people would love to have your skin color because you have a white mom and a Black dad. I always like to differentiate that. Just if someone says bipolar, since you can't see her, she could be a model, and she's beautiful. So having said that, though, so when you were growing up, your mom didn't quite know how to do your hair, and so then it was oh, well, and you know how kids are. They'll just find something.
Yes.
And it sucks, obviously, that was racist. Way worse than anything else. But, my name is Tara. But people will see it and even hear it and say, oh, Tara. So as a kid, it really bothered me. It is nothing in comparison. But they just find something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it just piles on when it's a racist thing. Obviously, that's absolutely terrible.
Yeah. And then there's also, too, you bring up names. I do sometimes, looking back, feel like people struggled more with my name because they went into it with this preconceived notion that it was going to be I hate to use the word, but I don't know another way of putting it besides they give off the vibe that they're thinking oh, it's just some ghetto name. It's probably pronounced really weird because it is unique. There's not a lot of people that have it. And so it doesn't matter how many times that I will tell them how to say it correctly. That's never how they're going to say it. That's been with teachers my whole life growing up. people outside of obviously like family and friends, even at work. Not so much now because I luckily get to work around a lot more people closer to my age
Yeah.
range now. And things have definitely evolved a lot since even when I was younger, which is really nice. Like, as sad as it is, I am curious in some ways to see how, like, when my nieces and nephews get older and hearing their experiences, like, did they experience some of the same things that I was? Because I know things obviously were a lot better for me now than it probably was for like my dad when he was growing up.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably a lot better than my sisters. You know, there's a 10-year age difference there. So I'm sure there's already some shifts. But it is crazy to think about, you know, because let's see, if I was in like third grade, that would have been around 2007, 2008, and I've got kids calling me the N-word. It's just kind of crazy. I will say, I'm sure demographic and like regional stuff plays a big factor, just for the fact that I've born and raised in Washington State, which has a super low Black population. I think by the time I was graduating high school, we were just at 2% or less than 2%. So, of course, again, I don't have a lot of representation outside of going to my dad's house or seeing my siblings. I didn't get to be around people that looked like me. So, of course, you know, on top of bullying, I struggled a lot more with self-hatred. And just, I wanted to be white like my mom. I wanted to be white like the people I went to school with. I used to, more so in high school, I think is when I grappled. It was a lot harder for me to grapple with some of that. Especially because you're dealing with a lot more peer pressure. You want to fit in, you want boys to like you, and I didn't fit any of that stuff. And so, like, I was like, how can I get away with like skin bleaching? Like, how can I be lighter? You know, I used to straighten my hair. I would refuse to let my hair be curly and go out in public. If I wanted to like take the time to heal it or whatever and go natural, I would wait until summer breaks where I could just be at home for 3 months and not have to go out in public. So it is a little crazy looking back to think that that's like the mindset, because it's I think so differently now. And then of course, because of the lots of like the self-hate and my own internal anti-blackness, because of, again, just the lack of representation. You know, I was never taught or really shown how to like navigate it, and so of course I'm not thinking that there's stuff that's wrong with other people. I'm thinking there's stuff that's wrong with me. Like, what's wrong with, you know, like my culture? Like, what's wrong with the people that I'm having to like almost face the sins of like whatever, like, you know, what's going on. And so I definitely also dealt with a lot of like stereotype threat. And for those, if you don't know what that is, it's essentially where you're so worried about fulfilling a stereotype that somebody might have for you that you'll do everything in your power to be the opposite and work the opposite of that. So like, I didn't want to be caught listening to like hip hop or rap music. I was driving into school. I didn't want to be associated with that. I refused to wear winter coats that were puffy because of the connotations that I also got picked on for that. Like in elementary school, I had like just like a puffer winter jacket with like a fur-lined hood, and I got bullied so bad for that jacket.
So ridiculous.
And so I refused to wear winter coats from that point on.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember that was a big issue. She's like, it's like literally the middle of winter. Why are you going with a hoodie? I wasn't going to tell her. So I just kind of dealt with it. Also, too, it's like, of course, too, as I got a little bit older, you know, my dad got remarried to a black woman, so it was nice. I was able to get some more of that representation and kind of be taught, and I got to be around, you know, her kids, so I got to have kind of siblings that were around me more often. And so it was kind of nice in those moments where I was over there, because I got to be around people that looked like me. They were navigating the same things as me. And also in the same areas, you know, like even when they were going to school, they got to live in places that were a little bit better, population-wise and like diversity-wise, but it wasn't like it was a whole lot. And just like even some of the differences, because of the fact that you know, I lived there part-time but full-time. I lived in a white household. When I would go over there and essentially just be taught the things that I probably should have been learning at home, it was very eye-opening to me. It's like, wow, like this isn't just our family. I guarantee you there's other families having this conversation. And one of the ones that really stuck out is one of my older brothers had just turned 18. And we had all sat around, and I remember my stepmom having to have a conversation with him of like, you need to remember that you might feel like you're a kid, I might call you a kid, but when you walk out this door, you are a black man. And you don't get to do the same things that your friends do. Your friends do something stupid, it's fun, you think normal teenagers do it, you're not a normal teenager. You know, once you hit a certain age, you're not seen as that, and you lose all of those options to make mistakes and the privilege to be able to make a mistake, because your mistake, you know, your friend's mistake that might cost them, you know, a phone call home from a cop is me having to bear it. And so these were real conversations that each of us kids had to have as we started just getting older. And that was pretty eye-opening for me, and I know it was for him too. I know that was really hard for us to kind of have that reality check as well, because it introduces a new fear of like, oh, like it's not really fair to think that like your brother can just be a dumb teenager and he just doesn't have to be alive anymore.
Yeah.
Or just in general, just, you know, it's just a lot of feelings of unfairness.
Yeah.
And then especially too of just, I don't mean to get emotional.
It's an emotional topic. You cry though, I will start crying, and I'm the one on phone, so just you keep that in mind, girl.
I'll reel it in. Yeah, so a lot of it is just that too, and then on top of it, you know, we live in a society where people are constantly telling you that you lie about it, it's not true, it's not happening, so it's like, you know,
This is white people telling you this because they've never experienced it.
Yeah, and it's like I don't think people will realize how crazy it will make you feel to, you know, to sit down and have a conversation, or hear a conversation with your loved one, basically of them being told that if you make one wrong move, you're dead. And you know, it's your family, of course, you're going to have fear about it. And then, you know, you have all these people around you telling you that it's not true. Or that all of the experiences that you've dealt with are invalid and it's never happened. And one of the things I know too, like for me, that was really hurtful is like, even, you know, like the whole 2020 movement, was very eye-opening in a lot of ways, where it was really nice, I think, to watch people kind of acknowledge it, but in the process I don't think sometimes people realize how hurtful some of the things that they say come across. Like I had friends in that moment that came to realizations, and there's parts of me where I'm like, I appreciate their honesty and their ability to see how ignorant it is, but it doesn't make it any less hurtful. Where I've basically been told that like certain friends that I have who are white were willing to be my friend, because I wasn't too black for them to feel uncomfortable. I was just enough, because I'm not dark skinned, or because I have a white mom and I wasn't raised in the same type of blackness, so I didn't exude that type of culture. I didn't talk in like Ave, or you know, the way that I dressed, it was more what's the word I'm looking for? Like I assimilated better. I assimilated better into what people felt was comfortable, but it sucks to know that it was all rooting for me dealing with feelings of like self-hatred,
Right.
and just wanting to fit in spaces that I was never going to fit into, and then being told that because you denied yourself who you were and your identity, I was willing to be your friend because it made me comfortable. And that was really hard to grasp and hear, obviously, being told basically like you were one of the good ones. That's always a great phrase to hear. It's not, definitely heard it from outside of just my friends. I've also had experiences too where like, this was also when I was younger. Thank God this wasn't stuff that happened as an adult. Didn't make it any less hurtful, but I don't hold the same like hard feelings towards them because it's also kids coming at me. But it also made it really easy for people to have like ammunition if I did something that could have possibly upset them. So like, one time, couldn't have been maybe like the fourth or fifth grade. And I was hanging out with one of my friends, and we're just being young idiots, probably annoying her older sister. And her older sister had a friend over, and both of them like snapped out on us, and it turned directly to me of like just the N-word, every racist possible thing you could think of. They were launching it at me just to make sure, because they knew it was going to get a reaction, because it's like one of those hurtful things you could do. So it always made it like really easy for people to just resort to that. There's been another incident with that too when I was probably in like sixth or seventh grade. Different people were like, I was probably like, probably messing around, and I might have said a joke that maybe crossed the line. I don't even honestly remember. It was pretty minor. It's just little kids getting into like whatever they get into, but escalating it to a whole nother level because they knew that it was going to cause an effect or cause a reaction.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of hard. There's also too, just like again, as I get older and the more I just realize how certain things are so normalized, and it is really weird, and it does start to make you kind of question your self-worth of like, the music that we have, like if you really think about it, like especially with like rap music nowadays. And I've done my fair share of research. I always will encourage everyone to do their own. I don't want people to take everything I say as fact. But there's been a lot of research and things and testimonies that have come out from people, that are really famous music artists that get told that, they try to change the things that they talk about in their songs, and they get threatened to drop them off of their labels. And this typically refers to, I'll just kind of ask it as like a rhetorical question, is if you can think about any other genre of music or group of people where it's almost socially acceptable to sing songs about killing them and make them radio top hits. But for Black people, that is just normal. That's accepted. And now we also, because of the fact that that is allowed and it's so popularized and encouraged to make that kind of content, as I said, there is people that have tried to change that, and they get told like they lose brand deals, they lose money, they get all these types of threats. I'm like, okay, I'll just go back to what I was doing.
Right.
It wouldn't be acceptable for anybody else, but it is for Black people. And it's also like, what is that telling our youth and other people about how they should feel about themselves, to be part of a demographic where hit songs are about murdering people that look like, and that's acceptable and that's okay. Or even just like when, Black people die in unjust situations or police brutality. I know, of course, that it's not exclusive just to Black people, but it's also like people have become so desensitized to just sharing it around. Like, why is that so normal? Like there's videos all over the internet of different people that die, and it's all hard to watch, but there's just something about like the way that they're willing to show those videos on the news.
Yeah.
They're willing to show them on YouTube. You can access them on Facebook. You can't access some of the other things to the same degree so openly on such popular public platforms like that. Like you have to really search through, but for people it's everywhere. I can send you a 30-second clip off like the most popular Facebook page, and it might not even have a content warning on it, but it's a real person getting killed
Yeah.
on camera.
Yeah.
Which again, it's like, what does that say about like, or what does that tell the people that are part of that demographic when you watch it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it really does send this message, just like, you know, your life isn't worth that much. You know, it's almost like the equivalency, honestly, how it feels. This is personal opinion. I'm not speaking for everybody. You know, of like, it's the equivalency of showing somebody like step on a bug and share it out. Like, no big deal, whatever,
Right.
just this. And I also feel like it's important to say too, and one thing is because I am biracial and I'm not dark skinned, is there's almost like a hierarchy or like a class system just in the Black community because of the stuff that happens. So like, you know, being told I'm one of the good ones, I know for a fact it's part of the reason is because of how, you know, I dealt with a lot of stereotype threats. So I tried to assimilate, talk as white as I could. I tried to push myself into those, you know, boundaries. But also, I'm not a super dark person. I'm not light enough that somebody's going to confuse me for being a white person or
Right.
anything. But I also understand and will always acknowledge the fact that I'm aware that I have more privilege than other people that are. I know that I will most likely have more privilege and opportunity in some aspects, even in comparison to my siblings, because of the fact that I am white. Which sucks. It's a hurtful thing. It sucks to feel like, you know, you get to have opportunities that, you know, the people that you care most about in your life don't get to have just because your skin tone happens to be a shade lighter than theirs.
Right.
So that's also something that's a little bit hard to kind of like grapple with at times. I acknowledge and am aware of probably some of the privileges I've been able to gain just in like my career because of it. Or just in other aspects, but there's a lot too where like even with all that being said, you know, I've still had to face my fair share of stuff. You know, I've been followed around in the grocery stores with people thinking that I'm, you know, gonna steal. That's happened multiple times. When I had my first job, I worked at a dog kennel, and at one point I started working up front. And I got braids done for the first time. I got box braids done. And I came to work that day, and the owner saw me. She was like an older, like boomer white lady. She just seemed like really surprised and like lots of like passive aggressive comments. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't allowed to work up front anymore. They were like, "We're actually going to move you off reception stuff, and we'll have you go back to like working with the dogs," which I was like fine with. But again, it was like looking back on it.
Yeah.
It's like that's very interesting timing and coincidence of stuff. And then when I got my braids out, I got to go back. Yeah, so it's just like there's always like things like that that are just. It's like one of those where I don't really notice it because, you know, hindsight's 2020.
Right.
And especially too is like I don't try to look for that stuff, but I think a lot of it too. When I look back on interactions I've had, I feel like I was almost ignorant to it in some aspects.
Well, it's easier, really.
Yeah.
If you choose not to see it, it's not there unless you know you do. But that's the thing, and that's why we're talking. Is people need to be just more aware, and that was just a coping mechanism for you. It was easier. It was a coping mechanism to not like, because I can imagine you could almost have to analyze everything you do, every interaction, and
Yeah, or, you know, making sure, feeling like I had a higher expectation on me, even in schools, because I didn't want to be associated with, like, being the troublemaking black kid. Because I felt like I already had that card on me, like, in elementary school, the school that I went to initially in Snohomish, when we first moved to Snohomish, is where I felt like I was really noticing it more, where it felt like little minor things that I did like the hammer was coming down like 3 times as hard. Like I remember one time, I was probably in like, I don't know, between 3rd and 6th grade, where I had the same music teacher. And we were walking in and we didn't have chairs in our classroom. It was like a portable classroom. So we sat on the ground and it was like winter time. So they had like the rock salt all over the place. And I guess when I had sat, I got some on my pants and I just picked it up and I just kind of like flicked it off. I didn't flick it across the room. I didn't flick it at a kid. But the teacher saw me just do a little motion of just like off my pants and toss something on the ground. I lost a whole recess over that. And it was called like super disrespectful. Everyone around me just like literally flicked like the salt off of her leg. Like really? I'm like, doesn't matter. Like, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and that was also a teacher too that like typically wasn't very harsh to people, so that was just really odd. They also, that was the same teacher I had that never learned how to pronounce my name. And mind you, I went to school there. My only music teacher from 3rd through the 6th
I was told
grade.
once.
Yeah,
It's really easy.
yeah,
You just have to ask it and remember. Like it's not
yeah.
it's not 18 syllables.
Nope.
It's very easy. 2 syllables.
Yeah, 2 syllables, very simple. Didn't care enough to learn how to say it. And so I think like as I got older, and then also too like, sorry, I feel like I'm all over the place.
It's okay. I'll reel you in shortly.
Yeah, and then another time too, I had another teacher. We wrote about like what we wanted to be when we were older, and I remember I wrote something along the lines of like I either wanted to work something with animals, or I wanted to be the first like Black woman president. I don't feel that way now. I didn't understand how politics worked. I was just like, wow,
Yes.
kind of cool. And I feel like looking back on that too, like my teacher's reaction, it almost seemed like it was funny to her. And almost beyond like like kids are so funny, like blah blah blah. Like it was just kind of like made me feel in a way of like this is the most ridiculous thing you could possibly think that's gonna happen.
Right.
She didn't say that, but
No.
I think however her interaction was at 10 years old, I was able to understand pretty quickly if like you do not believe in that person, and that's okay. So yeah, just like little interactions like that. And then sorry, I don't know. The last major thing too, I think that really hit hard for me was in 2018. Because I grew up in Snohomish and went to high school out in Monroe, and our neighboring town in Lake Stevens in 2018, there was a kid, a Black kid who got hung in the woods in Lake Stevens. And that hit really hard for me because I'm still going to school. That's a neighboring school district for me. I have, we all have access to that police report and the article about it, and just seeing how they reacted to it. They asked the mom like, could he have been a terrorist, and maybe that's why. Then they tried to say that he like did it himself, and they're like, but how was he able to do that by himself on like a pine tree in like the woods? This isn't like something at home. Like you can't do that to yourself. And also just the fact too of like, when they found it was found by other kids who stumbled across it and then like messed around and played in his room and was hanging it. And then again it just kind of sets the precedent in this tone of like, why the hell do we just not matter? Like, why is it that you stumble across a Black person's corpse and think it's okay to record it and mess around with it and whatever else? But you found like the body in the suitcase, off that thing that went viral a couple of years back, and immediately you're just like, I'm calling the police. I'm not gonna play in it.
Yeah.
Mess with it. So just things like that are definitely also very impactful, because it's like, as sad as it is for that person and their family, it's like, what if that was my brother? What if that was my cousin? What if that was my nephew? Of course, it always hits a little harder when somebody looks like you or is in the same types of like positions and situations, and knowing that happened like 5 miles away from me was very impactful, and it was very scary. And then and then going to school on top of it around people that didn't care about me, or they only wanted to be my friend because I was black. That was seen as being cool, or thought I was going to get them to connections to other black people. That was really common.
'Cause you know them all.
Yeah. So that was really common too. I literally it's almost like the token for sure. It's just, being the token, and knowing that either no one really cares about you for who you are. It's either they dislike you because of how you look and where you come from, or they don't care about who you are, but they want to be your friend because of the
benefits somehow
that come out of it. Yeah. So it's just very interesting. I'm sure that my experience could have also been a lot different if I lived in an area that also just had more diversity.
Yeah.
Even having, like I said, like toys on the market, like I didn't get to have lots of different dolls that looked like me, or there was never shows, there wasn't a lot of books and stuff like that. So that's why I say, like, I'd be really curious to see, when my nieces and nephews get a little bit older, because they've got to have all that exposure. I bought them all my nieces, I bought these dolls that have like different hair textures depending on like if you're 3C to like 4C. And they can take human products, so they're literally designed to teach your little girls how to manage their hair. And so, of course, I was like, I gotta get them all this.
Yeah.
Now there's like one of the most popular little kid shows is stuff like Gracie's Corner. Like I think when I was younger, I got to have Little Bill. I think that was it. Which that was a good show, but yeah, it's nice to see how much it's changed. Like I said, I think it's just really shocking to me that it really hasn't been all that long. And that was the experience that I had as like an older Gen Z, versus how it is now.
Yeah.
Sorry for my big spiel. I think I covered most points.
So to wrap up then, and so, these are all your experiences. So now, because there definitely is a lot of trauma and hurt there.
Mm-hmm.
And so besides doing something like this where other people can hear about your experience, I do know Black people. So they will be able to listen as well. I have Black friends. Let me say that, like the typical white person. I have Black friends. So that I wanted to do this channel so that people could listen and say, you know what, me too. Or as a white person go, oh my gosh, I grew up in like an all white school.
Mm-hmm.
There was one Black kid that was my freshman year of high school, and we had one Asian kid. Everyone else is white, but
yeah,
it was very, very, very small school. Graduating class was 250. So,
wow.
And it was the only public school in my town.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as tiny as some, but no diversity really.
Mm-hmm.
And so now at this point, this is very helpful, but also, I think that there's things that you need to work on to like understand and really because no matter what, whether it's racism or abuse or what, there are bad people out there. And like, how can you feel better about yourself because of all of the past, And so like, what kind of things do you think you can do that, because this is helpful for other people. And I think it's also therapeutic for you to talk about and let other people are going to listen to it. But, so that, like, what kind of healing do you think that, maybe from like, because we talked about before we got on film, talking about how the movement of 2020 and how it really became to the forefront. And sadly, still, there are a lot of tragedies still happening. However, people are more aware of them. I think some people have kind of opened their eyes because they weren't so aware and were wearing blinders. And I think, a lot of people that are my friends are more aware of the situations, because I don't usually have ignorant friends. But when it comes to like friends on social media, I have all types of friends, and certainly there are some very ignorant people out there that I may be associated with, but would never willingly associate with them. So it's like, because I want this story to be a happy ending. I want it to be, obviously, you've gone through all of this really horrible experiences, and I've known you since you were a little kid. So it's like, it's hard to, if you've been abused in the past, and then once you become an adult, it's like, okay, now what do? Do you go seek therapy? Do you shut it all away, shut it off, where you're like, I don't, I know that there have been people I've known that have literally compartmentalized so much that they don't remember some of the abuse that happened to them, because that was their coping mechanism. And I don't know how the brain does it, but it can.
So one thing I will say for sure, I'm a big advocate for therapy. I also did. I think I started going to therapy when I was like 16 or 17. And that's when a lot of my turning points started happening. That's honestly when I was also able to identify that I was actively engaging in stereotype threat. It's actually really funny, is I figured it out when I wrote a paper for school. I started writing a paper for school because I loved the school I went to for my last 2 years of high school. I did Running Start, and my teachers at the time, great. They weren't even Black teachers. And my history teacher in particular, she really believed in, like, I'm not into the whole textbook stuff. Like, I'll go over the parts of that's like required by the state, but outside of that, you guys are going to learn from like real people's like diaries or journals or like first-hand historical documents. You don't read about third-party stuff. And so like a lot of like the racial things that we learned and talked about were first-hand accounts from people. And when I started reading these documents from like, like 1930s housewives, I was like, sounds a lot like the things that I'm doing on a daily basis of like, what can I do all the time to assimilate to this? And it really started clicking for me, is like, what can I do for myself that will help that? And I was definitely getting therapy. The one mistake I did make, which, I honestly, I wouldn't even say mistake. I think it was still helpful for me, but something I didn't put into account was finding therapists that also share somewhat of your same background. So like, I didn't have this revelation until after I got a therapist that was also a person of color and started getting asked like, you're really well spoken about the stuff that you've gone through and like what's happened, but have you ever thought about the impacts of you growing up as a person of color in a white household? Have you ever thought about maybe that's why you feel issues with your identity? Have you ever thought that maybe you feel like there's something wrong because you went around, you went to schools with people that didn't look like you? You didn't ever get to really be around people that look like you. So of course, as a child, children are so egocentric. And what else are you supposed to think besides the fact that like you are the problem? It's something to do with you, not any of these other factors and situations. And when I had it kind of called out for me, I think it was a big reality check for me, and a lot of the stuff and feelings that I had shifted. But yeah, I think therapy is really helpful for that, especially with just dealing with the day-to-days, because it is hard to be a person of color, and it's especially hard to be a Black person in a country full of people that either don't like you, they don't want you here, they don't believe in the things that you do and you had to go through, they gaslight your history and everything that you've come from. And I think it's important to also put yourself in groups for it. I still don't, because of the place I live, still don't have a lot of exposure to Black friends. As I've gotten older and as an adult, I've been able to obtain more through like work and things like that. But it's not as much as I would probably like. And so what I do to counteract that is just, I try and put myself in like social media groups that are catered for Black people and around Black people, because you just have to find your support nets.
Yeah.
And one thing that my therapist told me as well that makes a big difference, or made a big difference for me, because she was Indian, and she told me that one of the things that sometimes people don't even realize or they take for granted is the comfort and just safety that you generally get to feel as a human being when you are surrounded by people that look like you. She's like, I come to America, like, I really like it here. I'm not saying like it's bad, but when I go back into India, she's like, it's literally like all the weight has been lifted off my shoulders, and I can breathe, and I don't have to necessarily perform in any of these roles. And so, anything that you can do for yourself to put yourself in that position, whether that be a social media group where you feel more freedom to comment however you want, talk however you want, whether that be different support groups that you manage to find, or they have different apps for like finding friends. Like, there's a lot of things that you can do. It's just really finding that support, because at the end of the day, especially for Black people, I think we all kind of understand each other, and the typical struggles that we have to go through, especially too, like, it's in our culture to definitely cope with humor. And so it's really easy to like find something that'll work for you. I found that really helpful for myself personally when like all the 2020 stuff was happening. I joined a lot of like little Black coalition groups on Facebook. I got into reading a lot more just like different Black authors, and it just helps to know, because when you're actively going through it, it's like consciously you're aware that other people are obviously doing the same stuff. Like, you're not alone. You're not the only Black person that has to deal with this stuff. But in the moment, it feels like you're alone, especially if you don't know these other people.
Right.
And so it's just finding outlets, I think, is really helpful. And of course, this is also too, like, it takes a lot for people to do it, but another thing that was really helpful for me was embracing my features. Like, I'm really grateful I've gotten to a point where like I want to be out in the sun, want to get darker. I like having my natural hair. I like having bigger lips. I don't dislike my nose for being like bigger. I feel like if it was smaller, it'd probably look weird on my face and just not match. But yeah, I think a lot of that too, it just came from therapy, trying to have just where I'm seeing people that look like me every day, whether that be just the people that I'm following. Like, I don't really go on social media anymore. Social media is fake. Like Instagram particularly, I don't really go on it. So like, if you go on like Twitter or X, like, look at your following account. Are the people that you follow, are they representations of what you look like, what you believe in? Similarly, and I'm not saying like, don't be diverse.
Right.
When you are in an area where you don't get to have that option, it's like, just really being mindful about what are you viewing every single day.
Yeah.
Has been super helpful. Like, they always joke around, like, there's different factions of social media. So you've got like Twitter, and then you've got like Black Twitter, where like your algorithm is predominantly going to be like, if you can get yourself into those, it makes a world of difference, especially too, because like the content there, it's so different from the messages that you typically see. Like, for a lot of people, are like my sisters, they talk about, they see a lot of content that sometimes feels like hateful or like not very funny and joking. And it's like, well, the stuff that I see is like lots of funny, joking content, but also a lot of content that's about building ourselves back up and like understanding where we came through and the struggles that we've had to face, and understanding that despite what the rest of the world views us, because at the end of the day, like, Black people are globally hated. It is a global issue. It is not just an American issue. It is a global issue. And so it's nice to kind of be reminded of that message of like, despite all these odds and the fact that the whole world, sometimes it feels like the whole world is against you, and then look at the stuff that you're still able to achieve. Look at the people that you have in your life who love you and care about you,
Right.
or the accomplishments that other people have been able to do that were, even worse situations than you were now.
Yeah.
And I think all that's been really helpful. It's definitely changed my mindset a lot, and it's helped me become a lot more self-accepting. I think when I made that transition was right around the time I was also willing to be like, I want to go like natural with my hair. Like I'm willing to I'm willing to let myself be punk,
Yeah.
basically. Like
Right.
I'm willing to truly let the world like this is just who I am.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, like
Too bad.
kick rocks.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so
No
much. I really
problem.
appreciate it. It's my longest video. I appreciate you. And you know, I love you, and you're like a niece to me. So I'm so glad we got to have this conversation.
Yes,
Thank you.
and thank you again for letting me tell my stuff.
Of course.